Have you ever heard of the show called Ozark on Netflix? Well, if so, after watching this video, you might be saying to yourself, maybe that show should have been called Wabash.
Everything was perfect about this fall morning in the Wabash Valley. Fall colors at their peak, not too much fog, not too little, not a single cloud above the layer of fog. Temperature was cool but not freezing, no hill jacks on Mountain Dew on the road. Things couldn't have been better at this time of the day. But before we check out West Terre Haute, there's a separate town that we're going to see first. Or maybe calling it a ghost town is more accurate, as there's only a few homes left in this place. This is Taylorville, where there's more no trespassing signs here than there are people. There's more rusted out cars than there are people. There's more stray cats than there are people. There's more INDOT mitigation site do not disturb signs than there are people. There's more malfunctioning air conditioning units than there are people. There's more dogs than there are people. There's more streets than there are people. There's probably even more Mountain Dew bottles laying around this place than there are people. People? You know, there's more visuals of Taylorville being a ghost town than there are signs of life. It's pretty much a done deal at this point, and it's only a matter of time before the government returns this place back to nature. With the Wabashiki Recreational Trail following the west banks of the Wabash, I would guess that the 60 acres of land that Taylorville sits on today in the future will be a state park, with a few buildings up from the old town and a Taylorville history marker for people to look at when they come visit and go like, ah, Taylorville. So that's what used to be here. What a miserable place to live that seemed to be. Well, kids, we got a hike to do, so let's get moving on the Wabashiki Trail. Come on now, let's move forward. Let's keep going with the hike. Oh look, is that a bald eagle flying above the Wabash? It is. Oh my. Did you get a picture of that? You didn't? Oh man, that's unfortunate. Stupid Taylorville history marker distracting us from getting a picture of the bald eagle. I mean, a state park seems to be Taylorville's destiny, does it not? The place is full of these signs here which reads, INDOT mitigation site, do not disturb. First off, why would it be the Indiana Department of Transportation that has these mitigation sites instead of the DNR? It's not like this land was owned by INDOT originally. It's not like there is some kind of mega highway here. I mean, it just seems more appropriate for a mitigation site to be under the control of the DNR. But I guess not everything has to make sense, so it's all good and dandy. Carry on, Indiana. Well, INDOT has several of these mitigation sites throughout the state, including this one that takes up several spread out blocks of good old Taylorville. According to the state's website, mitigation sites are implemented in order to retain the character of the land, and they can only be used for low-impact activities such as passive recreation, which of course means no new construction. Over time, these mitigation sites fulfill their mitigation process, and then they will transfer to other units of government through a process known as political notification. So yeah, you know, it's 60 acres of land right along the Wabash. It's good for access sites for canoeing, kayaking, or fishing. Nature trail already in place. There's a few buildings left that can be preserved to add to some historic access to the state park whenever it becomes one. Plenty of space for parking, plenty of space to add more trees and nature trails to what's already here. So yeah, I can totally see that happening. Maybe it gets funded by Indiana State University and maybe it becomes a research place for the school. Who knows? But this place is definitely on the verge of becoming some kind of nature park kind of place, no doubt. Well, if you haven't noticed, or if simply because maybe I haven't explained it yet, Taylorville sits along the west banks of the Wabash River, opposite from the City of Terre Haute. For some more context, Terre Haute sits on a slight hill that overlooks the Wabash, whereas Taylorville does not. In fact, just west of Taylorville, between it and the town of West Terre Haute, sits a giant bog. With that said, Taylorville has always been more prone to disastrous flooding along the Wabash over the years than the City of Terre Haute has been. For example, there is no levee that protects the City of Terre Haute from the Wabash because it's not needed. Flooding can affect Terre Haute at times, but only on extreme rare occasions. The city of West Terre Haute, on the other hand, does have some levees in place, protecting the town from the swampland that surrounds the town, but we'll see more of West Terre Haute later in the video. As you can see here, even Taylorville has a slight little raise in the ground to protect the community from some minor flooding. Well, you might be wondering, was Taylorville much of anything at any point? Was it a flood that destroyed this town maybe? And the answers to those questions in order would be no and sort of. Let's start with the history timeline of Taylorville, shall we? Taylorville has actually been called 3 names over its time as a community, one name being Dresser, the other being Central Terre Haute. The name of Central Terre Haute is thought to have derived from this community being in the central area between Terre Haute and West Terre Haute. The name of Dresser comes into play as that's the name that was slapped onto the post office when it was in operation. However, Taylorville is the name that is most often used when referring to this 60 acres of land. Well, just like with most tiny places, it's tough to find accurate historic documentation on this place. Taylorville was founded in 1908 and was called Taylorville after a local who owned farmland in the area. I did a search for old maps of Terre Haute, and I didn't find Taylorville on any of the maps until this one came up from 1936. To me, that just says how irrelevant of a reputation Taylorville has had from the very beginning. That is backed up by the fact that pretty much every source of information that there is on Taylorville anymore describes the place in a negative light. First off, the town was built on a garbage dump. Terre Haute back in the day was an industrial powerhouse, and with that industry came a lot of pollution. It was also common during that era for industrial cities to pile up garbage along the rivers, so it would make sense that there would be a garbage dump on the opposite side of the Wabash from Terre Haute City proper. There's even a book at the Vigo County Library that's titled as The History of Dresser, authored by Ray Thurman. The book was written sometime in the 1930s, and Thurman describes Dresser as being a breeding ground for all that was repugnant to American standards. Wow. Talk about a low blow. I feel like if I flat out said that about any community that I made a video on today, I would get demonetized on YouTube real quick. Apparently most, not all, but most people associated Taylorville, aka Dresser, as being home to ragpickers, thieves, and yeah, that word. Which wouldn't be that far of a stretch considering Terre Haute's Sin City days. It's said that the first settlers of Taylorville were squatters building their homes out of whatever scraps they could find in the Terre Haute dump or whatever washed up along the west banks of the Wabash River. The people of Taylorville would also dumpster dive for the food that they ate, along with valuables that they could sell to make some kind of money. In 1913, a major flood impacted the Wabash Valley, and the Indiana State Board of Health stepped in and called Taylorville the Peril of Terre Haute, describing the town as one that was full of hovels and how there would be multiple floods a year that would make life absolutely miserable for the residents. The state board continued to say how it was common for adults and children to surf through garbage for food whenever a new supply of restaurant discards was supplied to the dump. So along with unstable housing that was poorly constructed, disease was common among the small group of residents through an unhealthy food and water supply. The report by the state board concluded by saying how they were hopeful that Taylorville would one day end up as a park. So it seems as if my guess on what this place is eventually going to be was shared even over 100 years ago in 1913. There were even charitable groups in Terre Haute at the time that would cross the river and volunteer their time to help teach the people of Taylorville simple things like proper hygiene, how to be a good mom, how to brush your teeth, how to wash your hands, how to clean the food that you eat. So yeah, things were that bad in Taylorville from around 1900 to 1920. Anyway, as time went on throughout the early 20th century, the Sin City culture of Terre Haute slowly but surely made its way into Taylorville, and it wasn't until then that the town started to see some money. Men who couldn't afford the brothels in Terre Haute would come to Taylorville. Also, the Prohibition era was a boost to Taylorville's economy, as it brought bootleggers into town. By the 1930s, things were better in Taylorville, but the town didn't welcome outsiders, specifically black people, with the documentation clearly saying, "The people of this district are entirely American, are noted for their hatred of black people. No colored person is allowed in the town under any circumstances." and I've seen 3 or 4 different sources that have talked about that statement right there. So it was true. I'm not saying that every town and every resident in Indiana was racist during this time, but Indiana, and quite frankly, Terre Haute, has a strong history with the KKK. That is a proven fact, and because this topic always draws up rage in the comments section, I feel the need to clarify that I'm not saying that things are this way in Terre Haute today. I'm saying that things were this way in Taylorville back in 1930, because things were that way. Things were partially that way as well for the city of Terre Haute. Not saying anything more, not saying anything less. Well, with that explained, Taylorville ended up growing to have an elementary school, 5 convenience stores, and 3 churches. There was also an auto junkyard and a meat packing plant. Taylorville's population peaked at around 700 people in the mid-20th century. There was even not 1, but 2 taverns that served the town. It was very rare, however, for anyone outside of Taylorville to be a customer of any of these businesses. Today, however, the population of Taylorville is 38. As over time, floods have destroyed property values, with homeowners being unable to remodel their homes. People continued to leave. Some lifelong residents passed away, and homes were never sold to new buyers as nobody from outside ever wanted to live here. Lastly, it seems as if my prediction for Taylorville is true, as since the 2000s, after one of the major floods during that time, local officials started to purchase property within Taylorville by using state and federal funding with the plan of removing residents from flood-prone areas. It's likely that it's just a waiting game at this point, with a few residents standing their ground by not selling their home that they've lived in their entire lives. But once they either change their minds or pass away maybe, their house will then be turned over to officials to eventually make Taylorville a public park along the Wabash. West Terre Haute is next, and unlike with Taylorville, there's still plenty of signs of life in this town, although only half of the peak population remains. Just like with Taylorville, however, this town has had multiple names over the years, the first name being McWilkinsville, as the town was platted by a man named Samuel McQuilkin in 1836. The name of McWilkinsville didn't last long, however, as it soon became known as Maxville. This town started with a store being built along National Road back in 1834, which is the road that we're on right now. The National Road for a long time carried US Highway 40, and back in the day, all of the east and west traffic through the area traveled by on the National Road. Things have changed today, though, as Interstate 70 now carries most of the traffic heading east and west through the Wabash Valley. US 40 has also been realigned with I-70 to bypass both Terre Haute and West Terre Haute, so all of the businesses that once depended on automobile traffic started to decline once the construction of I-70 was complete. Originally, the town was able to grow due to the fertile soil in the area, which was suitable for agriculture, much like it was throughout the state of Indiana. In 1894, citizens of the town voted to change the town's name to West Terre Haute, and it's been called that ever since, with the post office being in operation since 1899. Along with agriculture included multiple industries such as a shingle manufacturer, a cigar factory, a lumber mill. Eventually, coal mining became a major industry for this area as well, with as many as 11 coal mines operating by 1906. There were plenty of clay deposits in the area too, which helped develop a brick-making sector for the local economy. Additionally, there was a gravel pit that was a mile wide northwest of town, which helped bring more jobs to the area. All of those industries helped the town of West Terre Haute reach a peak population of nearly 4,000 people all the way back in 1940. In modern days, West Terre Haute has seen decade upon decade of slow but sure decline, supporting a population of only 2,000 people today. The decline, of course, started once the coal mining activity started to fade. West Terre Haute back in the day, however, even had a streetcar line that connected the town with Terre Haute a few miles to the east, with this note being jotted down on a map from 1907. Floods haven't been kind to the town either over the years. West Terre Haute isn't necessarily right off of the Wabash, but the town was built within a large low-lying wetland area, so that wasn't very ideal to begin with. Also, just like with Taylorville, West Terre Haute has always been home to the lower income class. Things were never near as extreme in West Terre Haute as they were in Taylorville, but West Terre Haute wasn't necessarily home to trust fund kids either. There were very few mansions in town, and as we continue to drive around West Terre Haute in this video, you'll mostly see smaller homes and trailers, along with empty lots and blighted properties. Yeah, you've already seen a lot of blighted commercial properties off of the main drag. A lot of the town is sad looking today, really. It almost seems as if there's more mobile homes than any other type of home in town today. Unfortunately, there's not much of a draw for anyone to want to move to West Terre Haute these days. Anyone who's new to the area is likely to settle down somewhere in Terre Haute or basically anywhere in Vigo County but here. Sorry, but it's true. Sure, property is cheap in this town, but property is cheap everywhere in Vigo County and the surrounding area these days, so that's not necessarily a competitive advantage. And really, to be completely honest, a lot of locals claim that West Terre Haute's culture is backwards thinking and unwelcoming. There's also a lot of Jesse Pinkmans and Walter Whites here, if you know what I'm saying. Now, I'm sure that not everybody in West Terre Haute has that mindset or fits the stereotypical label that seems to automatically get slapped onto people when they say that they're from West Terre Haute, but back to the original point, yeah, there's nothing here to attract potential new residents, unfortunately so, and that is partially to do with the reputation of the town's culture that I was explaining. Also, with the economy of Terre Haute already being in a big struggle, there's little reason to believe that a town like West Terre Haute is going to be able to reverse the trend of economic decline that has continued to be seen here for the last 70 years. West Terre Haute is a long ways away from being a ghost town, but if nothing changes here in the near future, yeah, this town might be heading down that path to where one day it becomes just like Taylorville as it fades off of the map. If that does happen, once again, that's a long ways away. I'm not saying that that's going to happen anytime soon, but maybe I'm wrong. Or maybe I'm right. Only time will tell. On to the economic stats for West Terre Haute, as just over 2,000 people currently live here. The median household income is very low, at $46,000 per year, whereas only 2% of adults 25 and older hold a bachelor's degree or higher. 2%. Moving on now, the median value of owner-occupied housing units is $59,000, which is not far from the average price of a shiny new pickup truck, which there seems to be a lot of those in people's driveways throughout the town. Lastly, the poverty rate is 20.7%, and when compared to the numbers for Vigo County as a whole, you can see that the sluggish economy is a regional problem for Terre Haute, rather than just a lone issue for the town of West Terre Haute. Although I ran some data for Indiana by county, and Vigo County has the 6th lowest median household income out of all of Indiana's counties. It also has the 4th highest poverty rate out of all of the counties in the Hoosier State, along with a population decline that is on pace to soon put Vigo County under 100,000 people for the first time since 1940. So if the area's political leaders take pride in being one of the 6-figure populated counties in Indiana, and they want to avoid it from shrinking any further, then they should act quickly to try to reverse the economic trends for this area. When it comes to the crime rates in West Terre Haute, since it is a town of only 2,000 people, you can't really get a good, accurate measure on what the numbers are to compare it to other towns. Really, the crime that happens in West Terre Haute is mostly drug busts. You know, meth lab raids, marijuana busts, heroin busts, DUIs, very disturbing, creepy old guys doing very disturbing, creepy old guy things. There's the occasional hood drama here too, and by hood drama, I mean West Terre Haute might as well be featured on the next episode of the Trailer Park Boys. So sure, West Terre Haute is a safe enough community, but there's a tad bit more crime and drama here than what you see in the typical small town of 2,000 people. Basically, what you see in West Terre Haute is just among the classic signs of an old coal mining industrial town that has lost all of its jobs. Blighted buildings, rundown properties, trucks worth more than the houses of the driveways that they're parked in, and an overall backwards culture. Well, people, it is now that time. You can't always trust what's cooking in the trailer down the street, and you can't always trust meat sales at a gas station, but you can always trust Chris's livability score. When it comes to the education, West Vigo High School is what serves the town of West Terre Haute. Despite the poverty-stricken community that it serves, the students perform decently well, with math, reading, and science all coming in only slightly below the state averages. Honestly, I expected worse performance academically. Education gets a 9 out of 20. Could be a lot worse. Just like the crime rates, could be better, could be worse. Crime gets a 12 out of 20. Downtown is next, and West Terre Haute's downtown is really no more than just a strip of commercial businesses off of the old National Road. There's a separate area that we're in right now off of Paris Avenue that has some old commercial buildings as well, but as you can tell, they're all dying away. There also isn't really that impressive of a list of historic buildings in town, at least not as many as you would hope for a town that dates all the way back to the 1830s. So downtown gets a 3 out of 20. Economy is next, and the local economy is in a tailspin crashing into the runway. It gets a 2 out of 20. Recreational opportunities are far and few in between. Basically, you have a few hiking trails in the Wabash River where you can get eaten up by mosquitoes whenever the weather is nice. The City of Terre Haute also has a decent park system for a city of its size. If you don't mind hopping in the car, you can drive to other more scenic areas nearby as well, so recreation gets a 6 out of 20. History is next, and West Terre Haute does have some interesting history. Being an old coal mining village along the old National Road, dating back to 1834, yeah, it's interesting enough for a town of only 2,000 people. I'll give it a 12 out of 20. Next up is amenities, and I don't see very many amenities, do you? 2 out of 20 there. Last up is cost of living, and that's an easy 20 out of 20 for me. Not only is Indiana one of the cheapest states in the Union, but Vigo County is one of the cheapest counties in one of the cheapest states. All in all, the Chris livability score for West Terre Haute, Indiana is 66 out of 160, putting it in a tie with Belle Glade, Florida, of all places. Wow, didn't expect that. You know, maybe if the early 1900s streetcar line was still connecting West Terre Haute with Terre Haute proper, maybe I'd give it a few more points on the amenities score. Maybe. Of course, the town of Taylorville is on the verge of not existing much longer. Plus, if it's really true that Taylorville floods like once to twice every year, that place isn't worth living in anyway. Although I did see an article published by the Terre Haute Tribune Star back in 2013 about Taylorville that Some of the residents there in a newspaper interview mentioned that they like that their homes flood, like it's a part of living in Taylorville and it brings the sense of home. Yeah, real talk. I don't think I get that one, and I don't think I ever will. Yeah, have fun dealing with that mess. Not for me. Look, the future of West Terre Haute doesn't look good. I think that it would take an economic spark in Terre Haute proper before a place like West Terre Haute sees any positive change. That theory would mean that the economic future for West Terre Haute is out of their own control. They would have to depend on the City of Terre Haute for any positive change. And if you know this area well, could you say with a straight face that you can count on Terre Haute seeing a decent amount of economic growth anytime soon? I sure can't, and that honestly makes me worry about the future of West Terre Haute. Well hey, if you enjoyed this video, maybe you'd enjoy seeing other videos in my Forgotten Towns playlist, and depending on what time you're watching this video might be the only one within that playlist. It's something that I plan on adding to throughout the year. That being said, we'll see you in the next video. Peace.